Meshech Chochma for Parshas Naso, and we'll begin at the beginning. If you open up your Chumash to the beginning of Parshas Naso is Rosh B'nai Gershon, and the Torah addresses the B'nai Gershon first in Pasuk Chav Beis, and you'll see in Pasuk Chav Tes the transition to B'nai Merari. And Rabbi Simcha focuses on a difference between the two, which we'll see clearly in Pasuk Chavav, comparing it to Pasuk Lamed Beis. Pasuk Chavav, in which the avoda of the Bnei Gershon is presented with regard to the Mishkan and the Mizbeach. It says at the end of Pasuk Chavav, Veskol klei avodasam, Veskol asher ye'asa lahem ve'avadu. You will not find the same words with regard to the Bnei Merari in Pasuk Lamed Beis, where it says L'chol kleim u'l'chol avodasam. Here, with regard to the Bnei Gershon, the Torah emphasizes Kol asher ye'asa lahem ve'avadu. And first, we should mention a machlokes between Rashi and the Ramban about how to interpret the word lahem. According to Rashi, based on the Targum, the word lahem is a reference to the Bnei Gershon. And Kol asher lahem ve'avadu. Everything that is placed on the shoulders of Bnei Gershon, all those responsibilities via avodah. However, the Ramban disagrees, and according to the Ramban, the word lahem relates to the Mishkan and the Mizbeach. And what does it mean, kol asher lahem? Anything that, so to speak, belongs to or is connected with the Mishkan and the Mizbeach. And the Ramban interprets it that down the line, various utensils that are used on the Mizbeach, like mizrakos and mazlegos and so forth, they will get ruined with the course of time, and they have to be replaced. So what is the Torah telling us about kol asher yaseh lahem? Anything that will be created for the purpose of the Mizbeach, the avadu. The avadu means that they require sanctification. And Rabbi Simcha is going to interpret this sanctification, this process of kiddush, with regard to any kelim that would eventually have to be created, manufactured for this purpose of serving on the Mizbeach. Says Rabbi Simcha, Pirish Kol Asher Yasa LeMishkan LeMizbeach, all the various kelim, many kelim, that would be manufactured, would produce for the purpose of the Mishkan and the Mizbeach. And that's how the Ramban interprets it. Nirad HaKelim shenasu LeMishkan LeMizbeach, Lo nasu lehejem, nasu lishma. The process of creating these utensils that will be functioning in the Migdash, in the Mishkan, in the Mizbeach, they have to be produced lishma, not to serve for chulin, but rather to serve for kodesh. And this is what the Torah is telling us here of kol asher yasu lahem, anything that in the future down the line will be created for the purpose of the Mizbeach is lahem v'avodu. It has to be sanctified. It means it has to be created l'shma. Kimo adds Rabbi Simcha, kedushas guf ha-kedusha. And here Rabbi Simcha, as we'll see as how he develops it in the hemshech, in the continuity in the paragraph, differentiates between two categories. There's one category called Gufa Kedusha and another which is called Tashmishe Kedusha. And herein lies the contrast between the responsibility of Bnei Gershon as opposed to Bnei Merari. The Bnei Gershon are responsible for those items that are guf hakedusha, that serve the function of the Mishkan and the Mizbeach. And those items, by virtue of the fact that they are classified and defined as guf hakedusha, they require Asiya Lishma, and that requirement of Asiya Lishma, they have to be produced Lishma, not for the sake of Chulin, is going to be derived from this pasuk. This is the source for the requirement of Asiya Lishma, Asher Yasu Lahem, for the sake of Avadu, for the Avodah. And that means Hazmana Milsa. Hazmana Milsa means the initial designation at the time of creation is going to determine the status of the object, and that asmana is a prerequisite that must be fulfilled in order for it to be kosher on the mizbeach. It cannot be used on the mizbeach unless it was created for the purpose of lishma, and that's the unique dimension that applies to guf hakedusha. And Rabbi Simcha is now going to give us a comparison, a parallel, and a proof. The parallel, based on the Baal Hamor, is the case of oros and ritzuos of tefillin, or of Sefer Torah. And that's called guf hakedusha, and they have to be manufactured as mana milsa with a single designation of purpose and intention to serve for tefillin. You cannot take oros or cloth that was prepared for secular purposes, for mundane purposes, and redirect it towards tefillin or Sefer Torah. That's the Baal Hamor Shita, and that's based on the concept of guf hakedusha, the parallel of which are those kelim that will serve on the mizbeach. That's called guf hakedusha, and that requires Hazmana Milsa, Asiya Lishma. It has to be produced L'Shem Mizbeach, L'Shem Hegdish. And now he proves that this halacha is rooted in the Yerushalmi, Meshech Yoma. The Yerushalmi says, Naso lehejet, lo yishtamish bo gavah. That if you have various utensils that have to be used on the mizbeach, mizrakos, mazlegos, etc., then only if they were nasa lishma, if they were nasa lehejot, you take out a spoon or a fork from your silverware drawer, and now you want to redirect it and designate it for the mizbeach, it's a no-go. Because this is guf hakedusha, and if it's nasa lehejot, lo yishtamish bo hegdish, cannot be used on the mizbeach. Now, says Rabbi Simcha, if we fast forward to the Merari, and their job was the planks, the pillars, there we're dealing with Masa b'nei Merari tashmishe kedusha, not guf hakedusha, but tashmishe kedusha. These are auxiliary, secondary objects that will serve in the mikdash, but they don't go on the mizbeach. They are not guf hakedusha. And therefore, Azmana lav milsa, we don't require Azmana in these cases. So that as far as planks, which again will eventually disintegrate and they have to be replaced, when you manufacture them somewhere down the line in the future for the purpose of replacement, that manufacturing process can be done l'shem hejot, and you can redirect them for hegdish. Why? Because that's called tashmishe kedusha. Ulachen, now we understand when we fast forward to pasuk lamed beis, lo nemarak lechol kleim. With regard to the Merari, it says there kelim. It does not say kol asher yasa lehem v'avadu. Why did the Torah omit those words? It was a deliberate omission to teach you that the Bnei Merari are in charge of those kelim that are tashmishe kedusha, And therefore the requirement of L'chol Asher Ye'asev Avodu, which is written in the Parsha of the Bnei Gershon, is completely omitted in the Bnei Merari. Because whereas the Bnei Gershon were in charge of a responsibility vis-a-vis Gufa Kedusha, the Mishkan itself and the Mizbeach, the Bnei Merari were in charge of Tashmishe Kedusha, which did not have that requirement of Hazmana Milsa, of Asiyah Lishma. That requirement of Asiyah Lishma is restricted, is limited exclusively to that which is Gufa Kedusha. The balance of this presentation of Rameir Simcha is a problematic Rambam. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Beis HaBechira, Perek Aleph, Halacha Chaf, Ein osim kol hakelim mitchilasan el l'shem hegdish. The Rambam is addressing those kelim that go on the Mizbeach that are classified and defined as Gufa Kedusha. And the Rambam says, Ein osim kol hakelim mitchilasan, when we produce these kelim, manufacture them, el l'shem hegdish. If Naso mitchilasan lehejot, if they were created for secular purposes, Ein osim osam legava. Adkan, excellent. Then the Rambam writes, Avonim ukoros shechatzman mitchila lebeis hakneses ein bonin osam laharabayis. The Rambam is talking about beams and stones that were hewed or carved out for the purpose of building the floor or the walls of the Harabayis, of the Temple Mount. And the Rambam writes that all of that productivity, all of the energy that was done to create these Avonim and Koros has to be done specifically for the purpose of the Harabayis. If it was done for the purpose of building a synagogue, that's not sufficient. And Rabbi Simcha is amazed by this Rambam. It seems to undermine everything that we've said, because the Harabayis and its Avonim and its Koros have the status of Tashmishe Kedusha. Why would we require the Asiyah Lishma, that when he carves out these stones and use them from the mountains, they have to be done, that process must be implemented for the purpose of the Harabayis. Even for the purpose of a synagogue, of a Beis HaKnesses, that's not sufficient. Why? Are we talking about Tashmishe Kedusha? This is not Gufa Kedusha. We're not dealing with stones of the Mizbeach itself. And here, Rameir Simcha refers you to his Sefer, the Or Sameach on the Rambam. And he writes that Ulai, perhaps this is a separate din with regard to Beis Olam. Now, Beis Olam, of course, is the Beis HaMikdash, in contrast to the Mishkan. The Mishkan was in one location, then transported to another location, re-erected, and so forth and so on, whereas the Beis Olamim was structured permanently, I would even say eternally, in one particular location. Where is the location of the Beis HaMikdash? It's the Harabayis. Does the Harabayis have the status of a Beis HaMikdash, such that the Avonim, the stones for the floor or the walls of the Harabayis, have the same status as the stones of the Beis HaMikdash itself? Certainly, I would assume not so, except for a Rambam. And here we're fast forwarding to the 6th perek of Beis HaBechira. And the Rambam writes that Beis Din Sheratza Lahosif, let's say, for example, Beis Din decides to expand the parameters of the Azara. The Rambam says, Yesh Lahem Lahosif. Beis Din, if they decide that they have an interest, a will to expand the Azara, they can do so. However, the Rambam says there's a boundary. What is the largest area, the broadest scope of extending the Azara? Says the Rambam, Yesh lahem limshol chazara ad makom sheyirtzu me harabayis. They can extend the Azara all the way to the parameters of the Harabayis. Aval Yosef me Harabayis ain biad bezdin lahosef. And in the Or Sameach, he goes into great detail and length to prove that the Rambam is based on the Shita Beis Hillel in Meshech Chagiga. But be that as it may, we see that there's a separate din of Migdash that applies to the Harabayis. And all of the Harabayis is a candidate for Migdash. We can extend the Migdash up until but not beyond the bounds, the outer bounds of the Harabayis. Israel Meir Simcha understands from the Shitas HaRambam that there's a din of Harabayis, the Ritzvah, or the walls of the Harabayis have a quasi-Beis HaMikdash status. And therefore, the Makom itself, called Harabayis, has Kedusha, what we would call Gufa Kedusha, and therefore it is upgraded to the requirement of Lishma. As we said, with regard to the Bnei Gershon and anything that's built into the Mishkan itself, it has a requirement of Lishma that's derived from our Pasuk, Yaseh Lachem, and it means that Gufa Kedusha has to be done not l'shem hejod, not even l'shem beis hakneses, but rather l'shem migdash. In Mishkan, we don't have anything beyond the bounds of the Mishkan itself. There's no such thing as Harabayis, and therefore the Rambam doesn't add this qualification with regard to Mishkan, also because it wasn't relevant for the Rambam to discuss the Mishkan. But the Rambam in Migdash, in the 6th chapter, Beis HaMechira, addresses the question of expanding the Beis HaMikdash, and it can be expanded throughout the bounds of the Harabayis. So Harabayis has a separate din of quasi-Mikdash. It's almost like the Mikdash because potentially all of the Harabayis is a candidate for Mikdash. And therefore the stones and the walls that surround the Harabayis have a separate status in halacha, like that of the Mikdash itself, and it comes under the halacha of Yeyoseh Lahem. Let us read here in the same Perek Daled, Pasuk Lamed Zayin. So we're skipping one paragraph in Rameir Simcha, and we're going on to Eleb Kudei Mishpachas Hakahasi Kol Oved B'Ol Moed Asher Pakad Moshe B'Aaron Al Pi Hashem B'Yad Moshe. What is the meaning of Al Pi Hashem, but Biyad Moshe? And here, Rameir Simcha quotes a Gemara in Masechta Kresis. And the Gemara says that the word Biyad in regard to Moshe has a special significance, a unique definition. What is Biyad Moshe? The Gemara says it's halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai. Says Rameir Simcha, the emphasis here on Biyad Moshe with regard to the avodah of the Leviim that is delineated in this parsha has a specific import. Al halacha shenimtzu l'Moshe, those halachas regarding the avodas haLeviim that were transmitted to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. And he says, Harbe Me'od, there were many, many halachas regarding the avodah that were given and transmitted in Har Sinai. Harbe Me'od. And the Gemara in Krisa says, Yad Zu Halacha. The word Yad, with regard to Moshe, is a reference to Halacha L'Moshe Misim. The Amru, and here Rameir Simcha quotes a Gemara in Chagiga that says, "Ein memanim miturgaman al pachas mechamishim b'nei adam." The Gemara in Chagiga on Daf Yudalid interprets Psukim in the 3rd chapter of Yeshayahu and Navi, where the Navi speaks about Sar Hachamishim. And what does this mean, Sarah Chamishim? The Gemara says that Sarah Chamishim means that anytime you get together a group of 50, a minimum of 50 people, then we set up a Parnas al Tzibur. We have someone who's in charge of that Tzibur that's made up of 50. But less than 50, we don't appoint a Parnas al Tzibur or a Miturgama. Says Rabbi Simcha, if this be the case, then perhaps we can shed a light on another pasuk here in this parsha. Let's fast forward for a moment to pasuk Mem Aleph. Elak kudei mishpachos b'nei Gershon. And then it says, Asher pakad Moshe v'Aaron al pi Asher. And the two words biyad Moshe are omitted. So whereas in pasuk Lamed Zayin, which is Mishpachos HaKahasi, the Torah adds these two words, Biyad Moshe. We don't find the same two words with regard to the Bnei Gershon. Why is Bnei Kahas? Mishpachas HaKahasi Kol HaOved V'Ol Moed Al Asher Pakad Moshe V'Aaron Al Pi Hashem Biyad Moshe. Why are these words omitted in Pasuk Mem Aleph with regard to Bnei Gershon? And Rabbi Simcha has a very, very original answer to this question. He says that if you look in Pasuk Mem with regard to the Bnei Gershon, it says, Vayehi pukudehem, etc., etc., alpayim v'sheish ushloshim. So that the 2,600 members of Bnei Gershon, that's a round number that could be divided up into 50s. However, there's another additional 30 members of Mishpachas Bnei Gershon. Now, if that be the case, then we can begin to shed a light on why in Pasuk Mem Aleph the Torah consistently mentions Al Pi Hashem, but yet in Pasuk Mem Aleph it omits Biyad Moshe. And the answer is because the Torah wants to indicate this halacha that Moshe Rabbeinu, as the transmitter of Torah, which is called Torah Sheba'al Peh, needs at least a group of 50. When we get to the Bnei Gershon and it dips below the number 50, and we have an additional group of 30, there's not going to be a Biyad Moshe with regard to those 30. And that's in contrast with the Bnei Akahasi or the Bnei Merari, because in those cases, we have a round number that can be divided up into 50s, and therefore the Torah in those two cases of Kahas and Merari adds the words Biyad Moshe. A fascinating diuk of Mersin. And now I'd like to fast forward to Perek Hey. Let's take a look at Pasuk Tet Zayin in Perek Hey. So I'm just going to open up the Chumash. We'll see it inside. We're in the Parshas of Sota, and the Torah says, "V'kriv osa hakohen v'midah lifnei Hashem." what is the Torah Shabbal Peh that's derived from this pasuk, V'ikriva osa hakohen? Says Rameir Simcha, based on the Medrash, Eina ba'a b'toch haregel. The word osa means that she's alone, and the Kohen is bringing her alone. Says the Medrash, this is coming to exclude the regel. We will not subject her to the Mei Merorim during the regel, because regel means what we call Rabin Mitsuya, Rabin Boim L'Regel. Right? There are many, many pilgrims that come into the Azara and flood the Azara during the regel. The fact that the Torah says Osa means we're not going to be mashkeh during the regel when there are many people in the Azara. L'chora, why is this so? Ein mashkin sota beregel. And where do we find such a halacha, a parallel din? Moshon roim hanagoyim beregel. Halacha is that if a person has negoyim, he has the manifestations of tzaras on his goof, and the Kohen has to do what's called a re'iyah. He has to check it out to see if it's tameh or not. We postpone that until after the regel. Looking for tumah and declaring something as contaminated is not appropriate for the regel. And this is derived from the Sugya Moed Katan at the very beginning of the Meshech. It says, "B'yom heraos bo yesh yom sheroa bo v'yesh yom she'iyat haroa bo mikan amru." That beregel noslim lo shivas yimei regel. So we will postpone the re'iyah of tumas negoyim until after the regel. It means that we don't want to undermine the simcha of the regel by declaring tum. Imagine the person is now has to be quarantined. And Rabbi Simcha says, l'chora, the same din should apply with regard to sota. We don't want to go through this terrible experience of a sota, ashkas sota on the regel. Ulam, however, Yushalmi Roikot Perek Aleph, which the Rambam paskins in Hilchas Shvisas Yontif, Perek Zayin Aloch Yud Aleph, Mashkinis Asotos. We do the process of Ashkas Asota on the regel, and we do not postpone it until after the regel. So if that be the case, why does the Medrash say that from the pasuk V'kriv Osa HaKohen Eino Ba B'toch HaRegel? Says Rabbi Simcha, beautiful chiddush, brilliant. There was a havamina that in the case of sota, we should postpone the process of hashkas sota, the Mei Merorim, etc., until the regel. Just the exact opposite. Not that the regel is an inappropriate time for hashkas sota, but just the opposite. As we say in Yiddish, punkfaker. The regel is the perfect time for hashkas sota, and there was a havamina that we should postpone her judgment, her drinking of the Mei Merorim until the regel. Why is that so? Says Rabbi Simcha Tzarech Lomer the Salkin Adaitach, if not for the pasuk Osa that allows me to implement Ashkas Sota now without delay, don't procrastinate till regel, we would have thought Sorech Lashhosa ad HaRegel. We should delay this whole process of Ashkas Sota until the Moed, until the regel. Not that the pasuk is teaching me that you're allowed to be mashke during the regel, but that you would be obligated to be mashke her and wait till the regel in the havamin again, before the word osa. Where do I find a precedent for delaying something like hashkas sota until the regel? What would be the logical, compelling argument? He has a Gemara in Elohein and Echnokim with regard to the Zaken Mamre, the Torah says that the judgment of the Zaken Mamre should be postponed until the Rega. Why? Kadesha Kol Ha'am Yishmu V'Yiro. It should be a public decision that we are going to condemn the Zaken Mamre to death, so that the Zkanim should understand, and the message should get conveyed very clearly, that Beis Din HaGadol, the High Court of Israel, has the ultimate authority, and we cannot rebel against them. Bekan, Noshim Chayovos Lir'osa. It's very critical that the women folk should see what happens to the Sota. This has to be a public humiliation of the Sota. Shenemar, the Gemara says in the Sefta Sota of it, Nosru Kol Anoshim Velote Asena. We have to make sure that the women will realize what happens in the case of she violated the Kini and Stira and so forth and so on. Let's postpone the Ashkas Sota till the Regel. But you might ask me, are the women there at the Regel? Nashim Chayomas Besimcho Bos Beregel Yerushalayim. He quotes the Gemara in Chagiga to prove and establish that the women will migrate to Yerushalayim and be there for the Regel. Therefore, Omar, the pasuk says, "V'krivo sa levado." We don't have to wait for the Regel. And the reason for that is because of Ini Adin. We don't want her to suffer waiting, anticipating in her anxiety until they finally, implement this process. Ba liatzmo liftei Hashem. Says Ubazasi Shaper. Now I can answer up a question about Rabbi Yehuda in Meshech Sota Daf Ches. Lo menatam hazeh elo shenemar osa levada. Okay, now we have to talk about Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Elo nuchal afare sha'afchi levada mashkinosa v'ein tzach l'shosa l'regel. Sha'arei Rabbi Yehuda l'tamei hasad v'pol v'yomer ein mamtinos ala regel. He says the following. The Brisa quotes a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. And the issue is, mashkin or ein mashkin, shtei sotos ke'achas. And the Chachamim are lenient and they allow for hashkash shtei sotos b'vas achas. Rabbi Yehuda is opposed to it because the whole process of hashkash sota in the Gemara and Sota is geared to get the Sota to admit if she was guilty. And if she sees another Sota that has the chutzpah, the goal of going through the whole process, Hashkas Sota, maybe because that Sota knows that she's innocent, this Sota is going to say, all right, I'm going to imitate her. And Rabbi Yehuda says that this halacha that we have to take one Sota at a time is derived from Osa. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda does not have the pasuk Osa to derive the conclusion that we need not wait and postpone until the moment. And now I'd like to show you that Rabbi Simcha sees in the ingredients that we need for Ashkas HaSota a very deep message. The pasuk Yud Zayin says, etc. We have these ingredients of mayim and afar. Lama mayim the afar, the Yerushalmi asks. Mayim imakom shebasa. Mayim is an allusion metaphorically to the sperm from which a human being is born, and afar is an allusion to the makom kvura, where a person will be buried at the end of his life. And the Mishnah says in Avos, Lifnei mi, She'asida litein din v'cheshbon tistaka b'shlosh dvarim v'ein atoboli de'aver damei ayin basa, etc. Ha'inyan the adam muadli olam. Now, Rabbi Simcha has a brand new insight into this Mishnah in Avos. We have a principle in Meshech Bava Kama, Adam muadli olam, which means that if a person damages someone, even without kavanah, he is chayav, he has to pay. The Rambam, in the 6th parak of Chol Mazik Paskin, said dafka b'rshus hanizak, which means that if you go into the domain of Ploni and inadvertently, unintentionally, you damage him, you have to pay. Aval b'rshus harab or b'rshus hamazik, if he, the victim, comes into your domain, or you're in a neutral domain of b'rshus harab, potter. In other words, when you go into someone else's property, you have to be very, very careful, and you'll be chayav even for a shogeg. But in a case of Rishus HaRabim, you don't have to have that extra element of care, of shmira, and therefore you don't have to pay damages if you did it inadvertently. Says Rabbi Simcha, Me'ayin basa ula'anata holech. Understand that this world is not yours. You came from a tipa srucha, and you're going to go to afar v'kvura. And basically, you go from nothingness to nothingness. Meheder el efes. B'dal lifnei mi'ata asid litein din v'cheshbon zei melech malkei lochdesh baruch hu shehu habaylim v'rshus shalohi. Every area, every location on the face of the universe belongs to him with a capital H. And therefore, v'atachayav af im shalo b'kavana. Why? Because you are in the rishus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The entire universe is his rishus. You came from nothingness, and you will go to nothingness. So nothing is yours here in this world. It all belongs to him. And now you are going to kaviyachol rebel against him. You'll be chayav in the rishus haniza, even shalom kavana, because adam muad liolam. Halotisamer saros rochma. The hairs on your head should be standing up from the fear that you are responsible and you will pay, and it will be divine retribution for even shalom kavana, because you are in the rishus of the nizak. If you'll think about this, if you'll contemplate it and allow it to penetrate into your soul, you'll never come to Avera, even Shalom Kavana, because you'll realize the severity and the implications in terms of schar v'yonis of your actions, even Shalom Kavana. And that's exactly why the Torah in the Parsha and the protocol, the ritual of Sota, adds mayim and offer, because the Yerushalmi says mayim means the tipa srucha, and the offer is the offer into which you'll be buried. And this is the message that we want to publicize to Klal Yisrael, especially to the women folk, as we discussed before, about the severity of a crime. Even in a case of shalom kavana, you're responsible for your actions. Adam muad li'olam. That's the symbolism, the metaphor of mayim and of. And here we look at pasuk Yutes. The pasuk says, let's read it inside. Bishbia Osa Kohen, she has to recite Amen and accept the following oath of the Kohen. El ish im lo chachav ish osa, v'im lo satis tuma tachas ishe. Within the context of this oath, again in pasuk chaf, the next pasuk, if we fast forward, im satis, and then benit meis, then the Kohen is telling her that she's going to perish. But the Kohen adds to the Shvuah, integrates into the oath, that in lo shachav ish osa, if you are guiltless of the crime of adultery, then hinaki mimei hamarim, then, so to speak, you will be protected from the impact of these bitter mayim. And that is in Pasuk Yutes. And then if you fast forward to Pasuk Chav Beis, it says, V'omra ha'isha amen v'amen. She accepts the oath. But there's Simchas a Tosefta, Meshech Sota, in the name of Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Matam and Lomar, V'omra ha'isha amen v'amen, Reuya haisa zu lavo aleo puranios gidolos. In other words, the punishment that is appropriate for the sota goes way beyond the question of whether she committed adultery or did not. Obviously, if she committed the adultery, that is a capital crime, and that's what the Mei Merorim is going to mete out. But even if she did not commit the ultimate crime of Gili Arayos, nevertheless, Ru'uyahi, she does deserve Peronios Gidolos, serious punishments and suffering during the balance of her life. Why? Because she violated the kinui, went into stira, which itself is prohibited in general, but certainly after kinui, and she was alone in a private place with this man. Something very suspicious. She has created a suffix, and as a result, we're going to give her to drink from Mei Merorim that's made from a blotting out of the name of Hashem in the Parshas of Sota. So the Torah adds a word over here. Let's see if I can find it inside. I have the Chumash here. It says, where is it? In Pasuk of Gimel it says, "V'kasav es ha'olos ha'ila ha'kohen b'sefer u'macha el mei hamorim v'hishka," etc. And second, okay, I don't want to delay it too long, but anyway, when it says Shenema v'niksa. So Reb Shimon ben Elazar in the Brisa in Sota, in the Tosefta, he says that Nekel Nivla Shenemer v'niksa. What does this word v'niksa mean? There's an extra word in the pasuk v'niksa. We can take that word out and nothing is lost. But the answer is that the word v'niksa means that she will be clean or protected against all perennials. And the Torah is adding that to teach us that she really does deserve, according to Midas Hadin, according to judgment, other perennials, even in the event that she did not commit the Gili Arayos. And why will she get away with it? Why is it that she is Meniksa and she is absolved and protected against any punishment? Says Rameir Simcha Pirush, Af Im tahore hi re'uya li'isurin amasha nistera ima itrich nisa atzmo l'sofik zeh Moshe be'emes sover Rabbi ben Azai b'sifri alakra via isha hahi tisa es avona afilu tahora. Ben Azai learns from the pasuk that even if she did not commit the ultimate crime, nevertheless she's tisa es avona. She has a sin. Rakshema, I'm sorry. Rakshema shehi mitbaza umisnaveles. Because of this whole ritual in which he's publicly humiliated, and her entire physical appearance, in terms of the clothing that she wears, etc., is all minuvel. It's all nivel. It's hard to translate the word nivel. Nivel means it's completely unkempt in a very extreme way. All this humiliation and the entire process, and the anxiety and the drinking of the mayim orarim called elad gormin kapara, they will bring her an atonement for the chait of kidui and stira, violating the kidui and going into stira. Ubazet nuka mi avam ulakach kosuv, and therefore the pasuk says v'niksa isha v'nizra zara. Oh, but he would tell me where the pasuk is, but we'll find it. I couldn't find it before. And it says here in Pasuk Chav Ches, V'im lo nitma'a isho tahorehi. It should have said v'nizra zara. Why does the Torah add the word v'niksa? Let's just see in the English translation. She shall be exempted. It means that she shall be exempted from the punishment that she does deserve, even though lo shakav ish osa. And that's because of the kapara that's granted to her as a result of all the suffering and the humiliation that she experiences. And therefore, it means that she will be protected even though she drinks from the Mei Morarim, and even though she deserves punishment. Nevertheless, the Shtiyasam Yanaku Osa, at the end of this whole process, and she drinks the Meimarim, Yechupar Avona Lifnei Avinu Shebashmaim. And then it's V'nizra Zara. Then she will be blessed with the Zer. And now I'd like to fast forward to Pasuk Chaf Aleph. And the Torah says, V'shbi'a kohenes ha'isha b'shvuas ha'olah the Amar HaKohen L'Isha Yiten Hashem Osa Li'ol Shvu B'toch Amich. Rabbi Simcha quotes the Sifri to try to interpret these extra two words B'soch Amich, that she is receiving this oath in the nation. What does it mean in the nation or with the nation? Says the Sifri, the Imech Shalom. She'enom olaf. Okay, fine. And besoch amech below bizman hazeh. That this entire ritual and the shvuah, which is recorded here in Parshas Sota, does not apply bizman hazeh. Why? Because it's not betoch amech. What does that mean? Rabbi Simcha says the words of the Sifri are ambiguous, are totally incomprehensible. What's betoch hamech, but not bizman hazeh? Pirush. Misharabu amenafeh. There was a period of time which the Sifri is describing. I mean, we're going back thousands of years, which is Rabu amenafeh. Af nisheach sherim enam nivdak. Even she'ama prutz. When does the shvuah work, and when does the Mei Morarim operate, and when is it active? It's only when we live in a generation of ksherim, but not of menafim. So imagine a man takes his wife for this ritual of sota when he himself belongs to perhaps the majority of a society that's rampant in promiscuity and immorality and menafim, he has no right to be bodek his wife, because it's not the condition of bitoch amech has not been fulfilled. Because bitoch amech means amech shalom. It means when in the status of peace and harmony and very pure activities in the area of relationships between men and women. But even when we get to the level of Amma Prutzin, then the Me'am Arim Einam Mivdakim, Einam Bodkim, they don't have the power to operate. They cannot function actively, even if he's a kosher. Even if the man who's bringing his wife Fashkas Hasota, he himself personally is a kosher, but nevertheless, since the door is a door parutz and promiscuity is rampant, then it's not bitoch amech, and therefore the condition has not been fulfilled. And that's called Bizman Hazeh. I don't think that Bizman Hazeh is a reference to our time period, although it could be, and even if we had the Mikdash and we had the Salt, it could be that it's Rabba Amenachem. I don't know. I'm not here to judge. But that's not what the Sifri is referring to. The Sifri is referring to Bisman Hazeh, a period of time much, much earlier, during the time of the Chazal of the Sifri. And last but not least, to wrap it up, is Pasuk Chav Zayin. Let's read Pasuk Chav Zayin. V'hishka es hamayim, v'hoisa nitma v'timol mal b'isha, uvo ba hamayim ha'ma'orim, l'morim, v'tzavsa bitna v'nafla yirecha, v'hoisa ha'isha li'olav b'kerev amo. Why does the Torah add these last 5 words, which if we read the English translation, he says, she shall be, 1 second, 27, she will be a curse amongst her people. Itafeng, it's possible. Ki zemi pu'ulas hashgacha protis asher dvuka v'am Yisrael b'nei Yisrael amo. The Torah wants to emphasize that this entire ritual and the process of hashgacha sota is indicative of the unique supervision and providence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the people of Israel. Very reminiscent of Parshas Mitzorah, if you know what I mean. Asher no salem lefiris amo lahavdil osam liamsku losa letire osam lichatos o mitznius. These are all the exceptional status of the Jewish people as the chosen nation that indicates the direct providence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the people, to separate them. They're the Amskula, the chosen nation, to purify them from all sins. And he quotes the Ramban, who says that this entire episode, the Parsha, and the efficacy of Hashkas HaSota is all L'mala min HaTeva. Hishem Shamayim Bodkim Ha'isha came Bodkim as Haboet. For example, the magic is that as a result of Mayim Ma'arim, we can even check out who the Boel is. L'chein Omer ki maknin umashkin osal yedei goy ben nech. So it means that there is a special divine providence that operates here on behalf of Klal Yisrael and activates in a very miraculous, supernatural way the process of Hashkas Sota. So Rabosai, let's just spend the last few minutes that we have giving an overview and a review of what we saw today from the beginning of Parshas Naso, and we're not even a third of the way through the Parsha, but this is what we covered in the Meshech Chochma number 1. The opening presentation of Rameir Simcha to differentiate between 2 branches of Shevet Levi. With regard to Gershon as opposed to Merari, Gershon is in charge of transporting and seeing that the kelim of the Mizbeach and the Mishkan are taken care of. That's his responsibility. The Torah adds Yasa Lahem, which, based on the Ramban, that Lahem means for the sake of the Mishkan, for the sake of the Mizbeach. Rabbi Simcha derives a radical conclusion in halacha that with regard to something that is classified and defined as Gufa Kedusha, the Asiyah, the production itself, has to be Lahem. It has to be for the sake of the Mizbeach. And you cannot take something that was made for a hedjot and redirect it towards the Mizbeach, as opposed to Merari, where the Torah omits these words, Asher Yasa Lahem. They are responsible for planks and for pillars and for different dimensions, which are not Gufa Kedusha, but rather Tashmisha Kedusha. Therefore, the Torah omits this requirement of Yasa Lahem. Secondly, why is it that the Torah seems to divide between two branches of Levi and one branch? Gershon is left out as far as the addition of the two words Biyad Moshe. A careful reading of the text of the Torah will see that Biyad Moshe appears with regard to Merari and with regard to Kahasi, but not with regard to Gershoni. Why? And the answer is that Biyad Hashem is a reference, is an allusion to Halacha Moshe Sinai. And Moshe represents the paradigm of what we call Parnasei HaTzibur, the leaders of the community, and quoting a Gemara in Krisus and then a Gemara in Chagiga, Rabbi Simcha proves that unless you could round it off to a minimum number of 50, you don't appoint a leader over the group that's less than 50, and therefore, in the case of Gershon, the Torah went out of its way to omit the words Biyad Moshe, because Moshe is not going to transmit his halacha Moshe Sinai to a group of 30 B'nai Gershon. And then we spoke about two extreme possibilities with regard to the regel vis-a-vis Sota, Hashkas HaSota. One possibility is to say that Hashkas HaSota is antithetical to the regel, because as we saw in Tumas Haguf, we don't have a Re'iyah HaKohen for Tumas Haguf on the regel that would undermine the Simcha of regel, and the same logic should apply in the case of Hashkas Sota. The regel is not the appropriate moment for Hashkas Sota. But on the other extreme, to explain the Rambam Shita, we will say that this medrash that tells you that we don't postpone the Hashkas Sota until the regel, there was a Havamim Edafka during the regel. That's the appropriate moment for Hashkas Sota, because the regel is a public demonstration. And just like we saw in Zaken Mamre, we will delay the condemnation of the Zaken Mamre until the regel, Laman Yishmu Biro, so that people will learn about the awe, the reverence for the Sanhedrin Agdola, and if they violate and rebel, the punishment is so severe, it's a death penalty. So too, the women have to learn the severity of violating Yichud, etc., and Gili Arayos, because the punishment is so severe. They should be there to see the Hashkas HaSota. In fact, the Nazir is there. Then we discussed the fact that Hashkas HaSota requires both Mayim and Afar. Why these two ingredients? And the answer is Mayim represents Me'ayin Basa, Afar represents Lana Taholech. Understand that it's from 0 to 0. Nothing in the middle is in your domain. You are totally in the domain of Almighty God, and therefore, if you are mazik b'rshus hanizak, even if it was b'shogeg without kavana, you're chayav. And this is the awe-inspiring fear that has to penetrate into our souls, that wherever we are and whatever we do, we're always in the rishus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore we have to behave appropriately. And finally, we discussed the concept that there's a great compassion here that the Almighty is extending to the Sota, even if she was not guilty of the actual crime of adultery, there's still great compassion. She deserved to suffer tremendously retribution for violating stira. And yet the Torah says, we are going to grant you kapara because you went through the experience, the harrowing and humiliating experience of the ritual of Hashkas HaSoto. And finally, we came to the conclusion based on the Sifri B'toch HaMech that there's no power in the Mei HaMa'arim B'zman Hazeh because Rabu HaMenafim, and we spoke about the great supervision and providence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu over Klal Yisrael in the supernatural, L'mala min HaTeva, magical power of the Sota and the Mei HaMa'arim. And this is where we're going to conclude for the day. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining me and wish you all a wonderful Shabbos, Parshas, Naso.
Good Shabbos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you.